News Talk 1440 WROK.
Good morning, everybody. Dave Schmidt along with Matt Nestor and producer Tom Warner on the Stateline Sports Hour. February 7th, 2015 looks like a nice day out there, a week after the blizzard. Which
at least got the sun out.
That's true. The sun will come out, right? Hey, let's talk some statewide basketball. And today, a guy that I like to follow, he does a good job with the standings, and he also tweets a lot from the Chicago area, is our friend Jack Gleason. He's with hsbball.com. Hey, Jack, how are you doing today?
Good, Dave. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Hey, you get around a little bit. Where were you at last night for a ball game?
You know, I went to the Little 10 Conference Tournament Championship game at Salmonuk last night. Hinckley, Big Rock, and Newark. I try to stop by there every year. Usually try to stop to see the semis, but went and saw the championship game last night. So a lot of fun. You know, I think that's the 96th year for that tournament, with no breaks for wars or anything. So it's just a very unique situation.
You know, when you look at what you do, you cover a lot of schools. You do some of the city schools. You do the suburb schools. Who do we have to look out for? You know, we have Rockford Auburn up here who's having a great year. You know, they've only lost to St. Rita. And you get to see some of those teams. Who do they have to worry about if they do get down to state?
Well, I think in the Chicago area, there's three really good teams this year that are pretty neck and neck. Stevenson maybe is a slight edge above the other two. And then you've got Simeon and St. Rita. And interestingly, I saw Auburn's loss to Rita at the Proviso West tournament. I thought Auburn was really good. In watching their scores this year, I warned the guys from the Sun-Times, who I know really well, that I really thought they had a chance to win a Proviso. Interestingly, that game, I thought, in reading the article the next day on the Rockford newspaper, I think they just got a little befuddled by Rita's size and speed that they hadn't seen before. But if they played again, I think that'd be a much closer game than the first time. But those three teams, to me, are heads and tails above the other teams. I'd say the next three teams that are kind of just behind them are Lake Forest, Morgan Park, and Hales Franciscan. Then once you go past that, I just throw all the teams in a hat. Two other teams that were really rolling good this year were St. Joseph, who's kind of fallen off the map now in terms of some bad losses they've had. I'm not sure those kids like playing with each other. They're very talented. And then the other team was Hinsdale Central, who their star Matt Rafferty broke his hand, I believe, 2 weeks ago, and they're having trouble now. But that's where it ranks. But again, I think Auburn is really good, and I really look forward. You know, their path downstate. I heard you talking a little bit earlier about the girls' tournament and the reference to Auburn. I think their path is pretty clear downstate. So it'll be interesting to see what they can do against these teams.
Yeah, that's interesting you mentioned the Rafferty injury, because I think that's one of the teams that they would potentially see in a super sectional, if I remember right, or maybe it was all the way downstate.
I think it was a super sectional.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. That sectional that Hinsdale Central's in is I don't, saying it's weak is a kind of a derogatory term. It is. It's very balanced, and it doesn't have the superstar team that's been in there before. Where, and as you said earlier in the show about, Stevenson being cycled in a different direction, really opens it up for Auburn. But I don't think Auburn needs anybody to open it up. I think they're that good.
What's the difference for Stevenson this year, other than Brunson, being a year older and just that much better? Because that really has been the team that has given teams in this area. We saw Boylan lose to them 2 years ago. Auburn lost to them last year.
Right.
And both teams just really struggled with Brunson. But they've got a bigger kid there now, too, a sophomore, correct?
They do. Justin Smith, who's really come on. He played a little bit as a freshman last year, but he's really come on strong this year. I mean, he has all the makings of another star player. Not a Brunson's caliber, but really strong. I think the fact that those kids have been together primarily for 3 years since sophomore year, Brunson, who's played all 4 years, and then Connor Cashaw's been pretty consistent for 3 years. So I think just being together, I wondered, seeing them right at the beginning of the year this year, whether they'd be a little stale, having been together that long. They wasn't peaked already, but I haven't seen that. And actually, after seeing the Stevenson-Lake Forest game, probably 3 weeks ago, Jalen Brunson may be. I've been going to games since I was old enough to drive, which is over 40 years.
You're an old guy like me, Jack. I like you.
I am. So he may be one of the best high school players I've ever seen. I'm starting to think that.
I would agree. He's just, every time I've seen him, he's just been amazing. Do you think it's something that could maybe help Auburn down the road, if all these teams make it down there? Because I think the way it lines up, it'd be Stevenson and Simeon potentially in a semifinal matchup. Is that something that could maybe help Auburn if they can make it all the way to the final, that those two teams would have had to kind of slug it out the night before Auburn gets to face them?
Well, sure. I think that, especially in the Stevenson-Simeon game, where that's become somewhat of a rivalry, and there may be a little bit, you may catch a team a little bit down after a game like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're playing here in 2 weeks at Niles West in the city suburban game, so they'll have one shot at each other. But if they played again downstate, those are the two teams that have been pointing at each other as the potential state champion. Again, forgetting about Auburn's out there. we in the Chicago area, hopefully I'm not like that, tend to forget that there's, we're just like a small part of the state. I realize we have most of the high schools, but there's a lot going on besides us. I thought that the tournament at Hononegah was really good at the Martin Luther King holiday, with the teams that they brought in with Normal and Neuqua Valley. So that probably helped Auburn as well.
We're talking with Jack Gleason from hsbball.com. You talk about Jalen Brunson. Do you think it helped him that he committed early and could concentrate on his senior season a little bit, Jack?
Probably. It's hard. We forget that they're high school kids, and there's a lot going on in their head, so that probably did help him out. I think, too, there was some talk about his father being hired at Temple as an assistant coach, and so he may have been pointing in that direction. You're right. It probably did take a burden off his mind. I think he's a pretty solid kid. He seems to be pretty sharp, and so he can probably deal with it.
When we look at the 3A level, because we've got Rockford Lutheran here, who's been a pretty good team all year as well. What do you see kind of in that, Chicago area from a 3A standpoint?
Well, the three big teams are obviously Morgan Park, who's won 2 years in a row. You've got Bogan, who is a step behind them. And then you've got St. Joe's, which is the wild card. St. Joe's has the capability of winning the 3A without any problem if the kids play together. But that's not been their modus of operation this year. Morgan Park's really good. I think they thought they were going to have a down year this year. This kid came in from Los Angeles, one of Dave's favorite topics.
Thanks, Jack.
He's really good. He's really good. And so he was the key. He's kind of the key that they needed to stay at the level they are. But they're not as good as they have been the past 2 years, so they're not unbeatable. It'll be interesting. The city playoffs are down to 16 teams. They play the round of 16 today and tomorrow. And then next weekend are the quarterfinals and then the semifinals and finals, obviously, after that. So it'll be interesting to see how they stack up against some of the good public league teams. I saw both games against Simeon that they played in the Red South, and those were competitive games. They hung in there with Simeon. So Bogan, I saw the 2 games against Bogan, and they beat them pretty badly.
We've been talking about the Sears Center a little bit today. What do you think about bringing the 3A and the 4A up that way and off of 90?
There was a time when I was terrified that was going to happen someday, that the state tournament was going to move to Chicago. I have completely changed my mind. I think the Sears Center would be fabulous for the state tournament. I've talked to Michael Bryan from the Sun-Times about it, and has had a couple conversations with the marketing director, whoever at the Sears Center, and he's convinced that they would do a fabulous job. And I just think it's time to try it and see what happens. The state tournament, Peoria's been a wonderful place. I've loved going there. They've tried to do the best job they can, and I think they just got hit by the 4 classes. And the people that go to the state tournament now are basically tied into the teams. I think you don't get all the basketball coaches going there, all the hardcore high school basketball fans. They just don't go anymore. So maybe the Sears Center brings in another group of people. The casual basketball fan in the Chicago area that will go see it. He's not going to drive down to Peoria, but he may go there on a Saturday afternoon and watch a couple games. So, but what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think it would bring in a whole new crowd. I think you would see a lot of people that used to go to it a lot, that now that it's a closer drive, because I know a lot of people around this area that that used to go a lot, and they just don't seem to go anymore. A lot of it has to do with the drive, and with the way the economy is right now and gas prices, things like that. It's a lot different when that drives only 30, 45 minutes to get there, as opposed to getting all the way down to Peoria or something like that.
Right. You don't need to stay overnight. I mean, that's
right.
To me, that's the key. The cost of that has become ridiculous. And Peoria's doing the same thing Champaign did with the 2-night stays in the hotels and so forth. And I don't mean in a derogatory way. I mean, they're trying to make money, their town and their economy. So, but I would like to see them try it, and I'd like to see. So the 1A and 2A will still be downstate somewhere, and for the hardcore basketball fan that wants to go down there, that'll be great. But let's try it in Chicago and see what happens. And the Sears Center really wants it, from what Mike tells me.
Yeah.
So let's see what they can do.
Real quickly, I love your page, and the page I love the best is the gyms. I love looking at the pictures of the gyms. You can't get to every one of them, although I think you have been. And Patrick, who's your son, right? He takes a lot of those good pictures, too, and it's just great to see that. I love that stuff.
Well, thank you, and we've got lots more. He has a full-time job now. He's out of college in the real world, so to get him to update the picture side is a little more difficult. He's still working, works for the Sun-Times on weekends, so we go a lot of places and get a lot of pictures. But thanks. I do love that page as well.
Hey, what's your favorite gym?
My favorite gym, I have so many favorite gyms. My favorite gym is Marshall on the west side in Chicago. It's an old gym that's probably 100 years old in an old school building. It's up on the second floor of the school, and it's got maybe 3 or 4 rows of bleachers on each side, and it's got a small balcony. Probably, if the place is packed, there's 500 people that can get in there, and it's just the whole atmosphere and everything. A lot of the city gyms are like that, are really small, and those are the ones. I just don't like the new gyms that have been built, what I call the boxes with the plastic bleachers.
Mm-hmm.
So, but there's so many. But what do you guys? What's in Rockford? I've been deficient in terms of going there. The neat gyms there. Lutheran's gym looks kind of neat for a small gym.
Yeah, it's a small gym, kind of has that really compact atmosphere. East has a similar gym where it's on the second floor. It's a really old one as well, up on the second floor. I think that one's pretty good. I think Boylan, just for the history of everything, is a really nice feel to it as well.
Uh-huh.
Before we let you go, this is the last question we're going to ask you, Jack. Who was the all-time best player you've seen in Illinois play?
Derrick Rose.
Yeah.
I do qualify that. Kevin Garnett was probably the greatest high school player I've seen. I never considered him to be an Illinois player because he just came for that 1 year.
Right.
But Derrick Rose, I would say.
So love it won't get your love either from Morgan Park? What do you know what? I do get on that a lot. Do you agree with me or disagree on that real quick?
Oh, yeah. I hate the transfers. I hate these kids moving around, but I don't know what the solution is. And I've read your articles, and I'm trying to think in my mind, what would I do? And I'm not sure. I mean, you made a really good point, I think. It was in one of your articles where you talked about the tuba player.
Yeah.
And if the kid transferred, nobody would care. And, yeah, so it'd be really interesting. So many of these kids in the city, I personally believe, do not live by the high school itself, but I think a lot of these kids live in the south suburbs. I say a lot of these kids, but I think some of the good players do. So I'd like to see that policed better, to make sure that they actually live in the city limits.
That would help, wouldn't it, Jack?
It would help. So, but I don't know what the solution is. Do you guys have the answer?
I do think that whatever the solution is, I think it's got to be the same across the board.
Right.
I don't think you can have some people doing this, some doing that. The best thing, because I hate to see a kid miss a season.
Right.
But maybe a half a season or something like that. I don't know if maybe that would deter some of that, but then also really let you allow to have some of the true transfers make that move. Maybe.
Like Marcus Posley here lost a whole year, and Marcus probably had a lot better excuse to go into Auburn. Even his coach at Ball State that recruited him said if he wouldn't have went to Auburn, he wouldn't have been eligible for us that year, and yet he didn't get a play. And then you see people transferring in the middle of the year and playing at a Chicago school maybe. Right.
Did Posley live in Winnebago?
Yeah.
Yes.
And he's got a brother that played there too, and he was from there. But you know how everybody, just like, is it Lovett? How you say his name at Morgan Park?
Right.
He was living with friends for a while, and he was eligible.
Right.
Jack, we're going to have you on again. I've really enjoyed this today.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Dave, Matt, thank you for having me on. Anytime, just send me a message.
You're great. We've been talking with Jack